Hi folks, Catriona here. We've just got a wee problem with our Instagram for a wee minute. There we go. Hi Instagram. Connections have been a bit of an issue tonight, and I thought I would set up a better system, and you can just about make behind me there. You can just about make out there. I've got Culloden behind me. And the purpose of that is really because we are talking about Culloden on the anniversary. I'm sorry guys, this is just not right. This is, Instagram is just being a bit of a pain. But if you can still see that behind me guys, that's just Lennox Cottage. Just there, sorry. This should all be there, but I've got like 3 different cameras going. There we go. Hopefully that works. Hi Amanda, and hi to everybody coming through on Instagram just now. And I need to be really careful because we've got cables everywhere. There we go. So, hi Bonnie, hi everybody. I'm wearing my Royal Stuart scarf because technically I'm still a Jacobite. I don't have any white roses, and I couldn't get out to get any white roses, so you're just going to have to deal with me like this. So we're just going to wait 2 wee minutes to see if anyone else wants to join in before we start, and I'll just make a few more hellos. Hi Whiskey Tips. I should actually be having a nice wee dram with me tonight, but I'm off the alcohol. Hi Denise, hi Kate. I'm hoping you'll enjoy this one, Kate, because this is a Jacobite and Culloden one, and hopefully I'll be debunking a few Culloden myths as we go along. So we're just waiting. Can you see me over there? There we go. Sorry, I'm like broadcasting 3 different places. Hi Sue! How are you there in Long Island? And we're just got a few more. Can you see my lovely, this is one of our pictures of Culloden battlefield there just behind us. That's Lennox Cottage. You can just make out the wee flag there. But I've got a wee slideshow which I'll be putting on behind me as we go along. So I'm just starting off with Lennox Cottage. That's just at Preston Pans. So that's Lennox Cottage there. So we'll wait a few more minutes. We've got Sansa. Hi Sansa. And Aspen Spa has also joined in on Instagram. I'm just going to wait another few minutes guys, just because it's quite an important one, and if as many folk want to join in to the chat as possible, you can. We've got Silpinu, Monica, hello. And yeah, so getting in with a Culloden. Right, that's actually, somebody's just moaning at me for my viewpoints in Culloden. As you can imagine, this day comes once a year, the 16th of April, 1746, and every year it causes quite an emotive debate. So for those who don't know me already, I run a group called the Scottish History Police as well. And our aim is to try and wade through all the drivel that has been basically enforced on us for the past several hundred years. So that's why Culloden is a really important one for me. It's something it's incredibly iconic for Scotland, and incredibly emotive for the people of Scotland and farther afield. It's had a lot more notoriety excuse me, thanks to the TV show Outlander, so a lot of people are now interested in it. That's a good and a bad thing, because it's brought in a lot more interest in Scottish history, but it is allowed to propagate the myths and slight, how could I say, well, maybe not being as respectful as one should at sites that are a war grave. So that's a real issue for us, and why I like to talk about Culloden once a year on the anniversary. Now, we've got Helen here from Ayrshire, so hopefully, Helen, you'll find this informative somewhat. And before I get started, a lot of what I say is formed from my own opinions. History is an opinion formed, you hope, from fact and from looking at the source information and listening to other experts in the field. I have done all of that, and I like to think for myself as well and try to put myself in the shoes of those people before. This is something which I feel is often missed when talking and discussing about the Jacobites, and especially the 45 and then Culloden. And there's been some really great work very recently, like in the past 5 years, by Professor Murray Pittock in particular, where he debunks a lot of the Culloden myths. So when we were talking about the Jacobites before, a couple of days ago, I did mention about reading his book. I really would recommend doing that. He takes it from a whole different point of view, and one that makes far more sense than the rhetoric that has been passed down to us before. So there's a chap actually at the moment who's moaning at me a wee bit because I was asked to come into a conversation by somebody on Facebook, which is one of those things you should never do, about Culloden. This chap basically said that he's been reading a lot of drivel today by people trying to rewrite the history of the date. My comment was basically, no, we're trying to get back the revision from the revision of the 18th century, which is really important because a lot of what we know about Culloden, about the Jacobites, even how Outlander portrayed Bonnie Prince Charlie in the period in the TV show, was done from basically British propaganda and caricatures of real life characters, and caricatures based on British propaganda. I can't say it in any other way than that, than if you look at the actions and the sentiments held by the people who followed Bonnie Prince Charlie. Now a little bit about Culloden. So Culloden was the last pitched battle on British soil, and it was basically the finale of the 1745 Jacobite uprising led by Bonnie Prince Charlie, or Charles Edward Stuart, for his father James, who would, if they were successful, who would have therefore been James VIII of Scotland. Now, there's quite a lot of controversy about it because Culloden for me is not about the actual battle. The battle itself, although it is pretty gory and horrific, there was no quarter given on the battlefield after the battle had ended. It was about the aftermath of Culloden. So whenever I talk about Culloden, to me it's more important to discuss the aftermath. The aftermath took out innocents, you know, innocent people, women and children, wounded and dying. It took them all, and it was almost an act, an attempt thereafter to obliterate the whole of the Celtic culture in Scotland. So that's why Culloden is so important, and why we need to make sure we get the narrative slightly more correct in our minds. And what does that mean? Well, first of all, there were two armies that day. There was the Jacobites, okay, and then there was the British, okay. A lot of people get really confused by that, and they call them the Hanoverians and things like that. They were essentially the British Army, okay. So it's important to note as to who the people were who were on the battlefield that particular day. The Jacobites, no matter what anyone says, was made up of majority Scots. There were Irish contingents there, and obviously a few English contingents, but I've discussed this before when we were talking about the Jacobite period in the 1745 in particular. The campaigns across Scotland were very popular, opposed to when they went down south. They had a very mixed campaign the moment they went south into England, with very few supporters, with exception to obviously Carlisle and Manchester. But the majority of English people, it wasn't about anything more than deciding who's going to be your monarch. In Scotland, the reason why there was a lot more support, and you could say the same for Ireland, is because it was about a change of governance. Scotland was not very long into the union with England, and it was an incredibly unpopular union for many. So the rhetoric will say that it was popular. It was just a couple of Catholics who didn't like it. That's not the case at all. It was very unpopular for many Scots. It was a very close vote when it happened, and a lot of the clauses within the Act of Union were forgotten pretty much overnight. As some people say, the ink hadn't yet dried yet. So from a Scottish perspective, it wasn't a very beneficial union. And what I mean by that, there were obviously those who were profiting quite well off of it, but there were many within Scotland who were disenfranchised with the whole concept of being in this union, and they wanted out of it. So much so that they had been striving for that since the union had been signed in 1707. So when people start to come in and say, no, but remember Scotland was part of Britain, so there was, Scots on both sides and English there, so it was more of a civil war. Well, I would like to put it to you, anyone who has that opinion, that if we had not won the Second World War, would you guys be saying the same thing about occupied France? And that is a real question that I want to say to you, because if you went to occupied France under Nazi occupation, there were many Frenchmen who were pretty happy with that. They were benefiting and profiting off of the Nazi occupation, and the concept or the idea of that going was not very good for them. And I'm not going to take away that obviously the French rebelled, and we had the French resistance and the Free French Navy who came here to Greenock. So absolutely not going to take that away. But if you were to look at it the same way that you look at the conflict that happened in Scotland, the only difference is that the Scots in this occasion lost. So it was very easy rhetoric and very convenient rhetoric to make it into a civil war, as in a means to try to stop that happening again. So obviously those who benefit are going to continue to benefit. They will always be for something that is going to put money into their pockets. Robert Burns wrote about it afterwards, bought and sold for English gold. There's a very good reason why he wrote that. And it comes from the opening of these new marketplaces and things that these Scottish people who were for the Union were looking for. And arguably many of the families who were very opposed to the Jacobites because they served the Hanoverians, served the British. I need to stop saying that myself. I get so difficult, it becomes so difficult because you get drummed into you day in and day out that you shouldn't be saying British, that you should be saying Hanoverian, but they were essentially British, okay? So the reason why I differ from that particular chap when he made his comment is because if I'm going to look at it from by head, yes, you have people on both sides. You have Scot fighting Scot, you've got English fighting Englishmen. But ultimately it's the messages about what they were fighting for. And arguably the English Jacobites and the Scottish Jacobites were fighting for something very different. The head, if you like, the figurehead of that campaign was something much, was obviously Bonnie Prince Charlie, who happened to be a Catholic, which was quite frustrating for many. But his being there for all religions was a symbol of religious freedom. So that's another thing that we need to come into, because people say it's a Catholic and Protestant conflict. It wasn't even remotely close to being a Catholic and Protestant conflict. I think people forget that in Scotland we had been a Protestant country, a reformed. We didn't reform the same way that England did. We reformed by looking at the Bible and deciding that this is a better way of doing things, and we forced our previous Catholic queen, Mary Queen of Scots, to abdicate. And part of that is because she was a Catholic woman, and that was just not a good thing to the new religion of the time, which is Protestantism, which is more like a Presbyterian and Calvinistic. So Scotland had been like this since Mary Queen of Scots, okay? Now, when the monarchy went down to England, this is really important, because when the monarchy went down to England, that's when James VI becomes James I. That changes everything from a Scottish perspective and having your monarch there, because no monarch came back to Scotland until, well, you had Charles I and obviously Charles II, but in terms of an actual resident monarch, the last was James VI. So that changes everything in the dynamics of how we were ruling ourselves and what people were thinking, and also you start to see English politics seeping to Scottish politics. And we can see that start to happen with the Covenanters, with the Irish plantations. You can start seeing that with making English the main language of the United Kingdom. It's now the language of the kings, whereas before that it would have been Scots. So you've got all these things starting to happen, and it starts to kind of change the whole dynamics of what Scotland and England were before. And arguably Scotland was looking to become more English. And those who felt persecuted before were looking to not be persecuted, and they were looking to this new opportunities south of the border to make that happen for them. And I'm looking at the Campbells in particular. They had a nasty time before, and they were instrumental on having William of Orange and his wife Mary usurp the throne and take it from Bonnie Prince Charlie's grandfather. Okay, so that's a bit of the background. So I'm just going to see quickly before I go any further, because I've just been yapping. So we've got Ireland. Hi Wendy from Canada. Hi Raf, you're not late. We've got Sandra Mullins from Ireland, and Kate. Yep, sometimes people blur the lines of reality and fiction. It's true. Bonnie, oh, happy birthday to your boy. We've got Tom, you're looking forward to it. Jenna, getting you some history again. We've got Barbie Girl and Akalia Mum and my mum on Instagram. We've got Brenda, hello, James, Gordon. Totally correct. It was the catalyst for the destruction of the Scottish way of life. We've got Joe. Hello, Joe. Shelley. Carmen. Buenas noches into Spain. Mick from Pennsylvania. Can you hear them, Catriona? What do you mean? The guys there? Or can I hear what? Can you see them? Let's see. Laura, hi. And Trish, hello. Lenny, it was Lenny that actually tagged me in that comment. I can't see them just now. So yeah, I can only see what I'm saying just now. So I'm not really that bothered. Marching. Oh, I see what you're saying. Marching proudly across the moor. I can. So this is, I want to go into the next point about Culloden, which is really, really important to me, because on that fateful day in 1746, the lead up to Culloden was some that's really, really tragic, because they were so close, like so close to achieving victory, if they hadn't have turned back at Derby. That's what we I mean, we will never know for sure because the history books were written a different way, but it is highly likely that they would have taken London and potentially managed to hold it and wait for the ships from France and the support from France, because I think that would have given France the kick up the backside to really get their act into gear with it. But that's not the case. So they ended up coming back. Obviously winter time is coming in, or winter time did come. So it starts in the August of 1745. So you've got that winter. So you've got people literally having to go back to their homes and feed their families, do whatever they need to do, the harvest and whatever else, and look after their people. And that would be across the board. So that's really, that was devastating to the army. Also, Bonnie Prince Charlie. And so anyone who wants to kind of come in, this is one of the arguments that I would say that it definitely was a Scottish and English conflict, in the sense that it was about who's ruling who. Okay, it's not necessarily about people not liking English people or people not liking Scottish people. It's about who's ruling who. And Scotland didn't want, and many Scots did not want, to be ruled by England, which is what Britain was starting to look like. So that's just really a really important note. I just want to throw in there. Hi Indiana, hi Dennis. So that's a really important point before we start really going into it, because you have them retreating. Half their army decides to desert because they didn't want to go into England in the first place, because it's not what they wanted. They wanted Scotland. Then you have them going and doing their crops, and then you have those who stayed. During this period, they start losing gains that they had made up in the Jacobite heartlands, which is up in Inverness and Nairn, and you have the Duke of Cumberland, who is doing extensive training on his men after the absolute catastrophic defeat that they had at Prestonpans, where they would just have men standing there and just getting people charging at them and charging at them and charging at them, because a lot of people would just lose it. They would freeze. So part of their training was just to completely bombard their men with people charging at them, constant. So they had all this time, which the part of the defeat at Prestonpans he didn't want to see again, ever. So anyway, they go up to, he's up at Nairn anyway, and so Bonnie Prince Charlie wants to take that Jacobite heartland back. And there's another myth I'd like to debunk here, and a lot of people are going to disagree with me, and that's totally fine. You can do that. But it's one that Professor Piddock did bring up, and it does make a lot of sense, and it's something that I had always thought about, because we're judging somebody based on their defeat. It's a very easy thing for us to do that, to judge somebody on their defeat. But you have to think about it from the time before the battle took place. And what was going to happen was, you cannot, if you do not fight, it's over. It's over. It's over. Because you're giving them more time to take more back in an area that is your heartland, where you've got most of your support. When is that going to come back? Are you going to get French support again? How are you going to feed men? You know, over the summer it's okay, but coming into the winter again, how are you going to feed an army? There's so many different things which come into play, and it's like a make or break situation, and that's the way I kind of see Culloden. And I think that by this point they were quite cocky with the amount of victories or non-defeats that they had at least had. And I thought that they didn't think they would necessarily fail. And if they failed, they wouldn't fail as catastrophically as they did. And that's primarily down to the fact that the Jacobites been marching all night. They tried to do an attempt sabotaging and ambushing the Duke of Cumberland's 25th birthday celebration in Nairn. The men, because it's not their local neck of the woods, for most of them they literally got lost in the woods, and it made any such attack futile, so they called it off. And so the next day they decided, okay, we're going to go and do the battle as we said. And I genuinely don't think they realised how bad this was going to be. I think they were thinking they could scare and put some fear into the enemy. It didn't really work. They were tired, they were starving, they were exhausted. But ultimately, guys, this is the most important point, and this is what I want to bring into Lenny with your comments there. They didn't run. They stayed there. They stayed there. They could have turned around. They were voluntary. They didn't have to be there. They could have been home with their families, but they were there. They chose to be there in the numbers that they did, because they believed in the cause that they were fighting for. So if anyone wants to come, that's another kind of myth. Following great men, following a man's folly. It was a folly, you know, I find comments like that incredibly disrespectful to those who were fighting for something which was essentially liberty. I mean, they were selling liberty on trinkets and items, and they were selling out all over Scotland at the time. Liberty was something that they were looking forward to, and more freedom. It doesn't necessarily mean in a complete sense of what we would see that being in a 21st century day, but essentially they were fighting for more freedom and more liberties, to believe what they wanted. Arguably, women were incredibly important at this time and in this particular conflict. So we had all these great women raising armies for this person, because they saw it as something that was going to give them more freedom from at that time, a very oppressive Kirk. So the other issue about, and Lenny's bringing up a really good point here, it would have absolutely gone. I don't believe in, and Murray puts a good thing in, because that's another kind of myth that we're talking about. It wasn't this romantic idea of a bunch of Highlanders charging. I mean, they did charge like any army did, but they were heavily gunned, heavily armed. They weren't standing there with their claymores and whatever else, and that was the only weapons they had, relying on purely the Highland charge. But they did have to charge. That was how they knew how to fight. And if you go to Culloden, it is just a bog. You could, I mean, I have no idea. I would never be able to walk across. You can tell now from the current archaeological evidence is that they were cut off on the retreat by the dragoons on horses with their sabres. So a lot of people don't really know this, is that as usual, whenever the Scots are fighting the English, we are outwitted by their cavalry. And it was their cavalry which was the death nail to what happened at Culloden. They were able to cut them off. You had the Campbells on the other side knocking down a wall, stopping people from retreating. The moment that they caught them, there were no prisoners. They executed and bayoneted people on the field, burnt them, put them in mass graves, and that was it. Gone. Finished. They then went within miles and miles of the battlefield and just bayoneted random people. Just going about their usual business because they could be Jacobites. I reference sometimes The Lion in Mourning, and The Lion in Mourning is a contemporary Jacobite account from an Episcopalian minister. Not a Catholic, guys, because there weren't as many Catholics as one would like to think. Episcopalians, who were Protestants, by the way. If anyone doesn't know the definition of an Episcopalian, it's a Protestant, almost identical to the Anglican Church, which is another Protestant church, who was the head of the state of the British. So, you know, it was kind of the same religion fighting the same religion, using a couple of others to fight their battles for them. A lot of people then say it was a lowland and a highland conflict. Not entirely true either, guys, because people, if you joined Bonnie Prince Charlie's army, you tended to adopt Highland dress. There were just as many Highlanders against Bonnie Prince Charlie, as were for Bonnie Prince Charlie, and the same could be said for the Lowlands as well. In fact, we had two Protestant Lowlanders who were generals. You have Kilmarnock and you've also got Perth. So Perth is not quite the Highlands or the Lowlands, it's kind of in the middle, but still, he's not quite a Highlander. And he was also a Proddy. So, but you did have the Presbyterians fighting for Bonnie Prince Charlie as well. And in fact, in Edinburgh, when his forces walked in there, they were basically, it was a fanfare. A lot of the people then say, oh, but as soon as he left, it went back to normal. Well, it would. You know, it would go back to normal. If you're just a normal guy doing your work, what are you going to do? You're not going to go and fight. You know, you're just going to carry on with your business. It's great, the idea that somebody's coming in there, but you know, there's different things which happen. I think I've just lost my thing behind me. Anyway, so has anyone got any questions before I continue and we can get some images of the 45 behind us?
It's constructed.
Oh. We've got some lovely advertising. I don't know if I'm even allowed to have that behind me. That's because I was too busy talking, guys, to actually pay attention to, I get too emotional about this particular topic. Is it not working?
It will. It might.
Okay, so just wait for that nonsense behind me to stop. I'm just going to read through some of the comments as that comes through. It's just doing that wee thing again. So we've got visited Culloden when I was in Scotland, very sad. Watched the film and the boy left with understanding of what happened during that time. Yeah, I mean, we do remember, I mean, even in the 20th century, guys, it's important to note that even well up into the 20th century, if you were a man, you could be expected to fight when called upon, And so a lot of those men who died at Culloden, they were doing what they were born to do. I know it sounds a really bizarre thing to say, but in an 18th century context, a woman was born to bear children and to possibly keep a house, but her primary objective was to birth children regardless of whether she was going to lose her life in the process. And the same could be said for a man. So I always like to kind of bring things into a more 18th century context, because I think we try to put our own present on the past, and understand what these people were willing to sacrifice themselves for. And I think it is our duty today to try and explain that better than to try and take away from what they died for and what they were willing to die for. I think that's a really important part of the question, because a lot of people blame Bonnie Prince Charlie for the Jacobite defeats and for the fact that so many died. Like we think, guys, and I have to say this, we think there's no real actual record of people who died or who were involved, should I say, at Culloden. But we do believe that there was about 2,000 men who were killed and then murdered on the battlefield thereafter. And there was about just under 300 government, oh I said it again, 300 British who were who succumbed to their wounds or were killed. So that's a really important part of the story. So we've got Denise in the scene from the Battle of Culloden and Outlander. Is the scene, sorry, from the Battle of Culloden and Outlander correct? No, I don't think so. Like, I think it was more artistic license. They were showing you a battle. They were showing you a very crude version of the battle and a very romanticised view of the battle. And obviously it's supposed to be portraying Jamie on the battlefield, so that's what that scene is all about. The section afterwards with the piles of bodies lying there and Jamie's lying there, that's absolutely probably more likely to be closer to the truth. However, it's very difficult to say for sure. We can only go based on our the archaeological evidence that we have, because the British very cleverly tried to change the narrative of what was actually going on, and to rewrite the history, which they have done incredibly successfully if you ask me, because we've got people blaming somebody else for losing, and not looking at them for the atrocities that they carried out. And when I say the atrocities, I mean bayoneting people, women dying in their care, sending out raping gangs to find Jacobites. Because remember, during this period, Bonnie Prince Charlie is on the run. And he's on the run for about 9 months thereafter. And people are hiding him. So they literally sent in raping gangs to sniff out where he might be, to terrorise the people. There's one account in the Lion and Morning after Culloden, and there was this gentleman who had been in jail for stealing something very pathetic. I mean, it was like something stupid, and he was only in the cells for a little bit. And after Culloden, and this is in, I should say, this is in Fort Augustus, which is a Highland town, a Highland fort set up by the British to secure the natives, and to watch over them and make sure that they comply to the new regime. That's really important. The story goes, this is from the Lion and Morning, that this chap was taken out of his cell after Culloden, so he wasn't even there, he wasn't a known Jacobite, nothing even remotely down that line, and he was hung from the neck until he was dead from a tree, and then they bayoneted his body for a couple of days as a warning to others to say, you shouldn't be doing this. There was a story, and guys, I think this was from the Line of Morning, and please forgive me, I'm saying this from memory. There is a story about a young boy, about 14 years of age, in his house nearby in the vicinity of the battle site, and the British had come to his house, and his mother was holding on to her son because they were taking him away. While they were dragging her away from him, they were bayoneting, and they shot him, and then they were bayoneting her husband as his husband dragged himself in. Can you see that, Mum? There you go. There you go. My mum's just giving me some advice. Centre yourself more. There you go. Thank you, Mum. So there's a lot of really horrible things that they mention. I mean, that's a 14-year-old boy being butchered in front of his mother, along with her husband, who, from all accounts, was at Culloden because he was wounded and he dragged himself back. So there's stories of a woman in Inverness having this man in her house who was a soldier from Culloden, badly wounded. The men just came into the house and slit his throat. I think they slit his throat. This is also from the Line of Morning. So there's so many stories about the aftermath, and that's really what defines Culloden, not what actually happened there. That was incredibly sad, but there is so many battle sites and sites of death and carnage across Scotland. The reason why Culloden is special is because of what happened afterwards. They went after women, children, other men, banned the plaid, banned the pipes, tried to completely kill off the Celtic culture in Scotland. And they did it incredibly successfully, actually. It was, and then they made us blame Bonnie Prince Charlie for it. I'm just going to quickly go back. History is always written by the victors. Lenny, that's why I'm glad you brought me into that conversation, because I just couldn't even... Anyway, Mum, I'm in the corner. I'll do it next time. Sorry, she's giving me pointers. Go and watch me on Facebook. Instagram's not really picking it up before. Oh yeah, James, they were also banned from carrying weapons. You're correct. And Mum, my mum's in here, she'll tell you. How many camps did they put in Scotland after Culloden? I think there was something like 400 military camps across the whole of Scotland, from the borders to the Highlands. This wasn't something that was just stuck in the Highland region. People often confuse Culloden with the Highlands just because the people tended to wear plaid and they adopted the kind of clan aspect of the Scottish identity, and they did that deliberately because it was a way that they couldn't be policed. And I mentioned this in our Jacobite thing before, but so many Lowland Scots joined, and so many other Lowland Scots turned a blind eye. I mean, one of my great stories is about over at the Hopetoun house, and the Hope family were massive, massive, massive supporters of the British and the government. And they, in fact, while the army was stationed in Edinburgh, they made them come, or they invited them to come to Hopetoun House in a method to stop them eating Edinburgh out of house and home, because that's what they were doing. The army were notorious for doing that. They would just go around and just take things. And that's where a lot of this disenfranchisement came from with the Scots after Union, because they all of a sudden you have these military roads and all these armies coming in and taking my stuff and all that kind of thing. But anyway, the Jacobites came onto their lands at Hopetoun, and they left. There's nothing else. They came and they left. That to me is a very, 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 very interesting story. The fact that somebody's so against somebody, they one of the top Hanoverians, or well, I would call them Hanoverians, of the day, and they allow the Jacobites to come onto their land and just leave. It's just bizarre. Anyway, we were talking about ghost stories at Culloden. Laura's just asked me if I have had any ghost sightings there. Personally, no, I haven't. I mentioned the story where my phone died and I was the only one on the battlefield when I went back, just as the sun was starting to set in October. But no, I don't have any specific ghost stories. Other people have told me ghost stories. In fact, I've got a ghost story for you about Culloden, and it's actually relates to the anniversary that we're on. And there's a group that goes to Culloden every year, and they have a torchlight procession to remember those who fell. And one night, I'm not going to go into any names, but you probably get this if you're listening, because you are a friend of mine on Facebook. But they had their torches lit and they were walking, but it was quite a windy, usually April actually is very windy, and the torches all went out and they were feeling a little miserable, like cold, and why are they doing this? They do this every year. So one of the guys said to the other guy, do you think they even care that we come here? And that's what he said to his pal. And the next moment, and this is what happened, I wasn't there, but this is what I've been told, all the torches just went on one by themselves. So they very much were happy that we still go, which is why I think it's even more important, if you are an Outlander fan and you do visit Culloden, that you do treat it as a war grave, because that's what it is. It is not a film set and it's not representing a fictional character. It's great, like I said before, we remember the, it brings an emphasis onto this period in our history, but at the same time, Jamie Fraser, there would have been a Jamie Fraser, there's probably a million of them right now, but there wasn't a character like that. The Jamie Fraser that you know from the TV show is fictional. So when you go to the Fraser Stone, they've actually had to dig up all the grass around the Fraser Stone and put mud down and some gravel, because the grass had been so badly destroyed and people were leaving all sorts of trinkets there. I mean, I go there and there's so much money, stones, rosary beads, all that kind of stuff, and it's like, you know, I get it, you want to show your respect, but show your respect by paying the centre money to keep the site going. You those people don't need it. And I have heard from other people that they do this because that's a mark of respect from their culture. And if you go to like Arlington or something in Virginia, or any of the mass war graves from the First or Second World Wars, you know, you can leave something, a little flower or a stone or whatever, that's totally fine, because that grave might be one or two, or maybe a couple of people leave something a year. What we are seeing at Culloden is daily, in the main season in particular, it's daily, it's just junk, and it's just pennies and nonsense. And I said to the staff,
Smog's Cave.
I said to the guys who work there, said, well, maybe what you should do is just put like a donation box or something next to the stone next time, you know. And he said, unfortunately they tried that, but people wanted to give something on the stone. So I find that quite a selfish act once you take it to that level. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind, please leave only, in fact try not to leave any footprints there at the moment, because it's so bad. The grass has been turned up so much, so try and stick to the paths take your photographs, treat it like you would any other gravesite. That's all I would ask you today. And obviously we can't go there just now, but when we do start going up, as I mentioned before, we go up every single Friday, usually is our Culloden day. I'm just going to quickly come through because Tom's always got some good comments. Tom, the Hanoverian government were, let's see, he's saying Hanoverian, the British government were intent on wiping out any possibility of a further Jacobite rebellion after 46. Having seen a series of risings from the late 1680s, the Battle of the Boyne when Scots stood with the Irish troops at 1690 being just one uprising. You're 100% correct there, Tom. It's always, I have to say this because this is a really important comment, and that is that from a British sense, and I've said this before, you have, or you did have at least, and Tom, I'm going to go back 100 years, okay, just over 100 years. You had 4 nations, well, actually 6 nations, but 4 main nations that we recognise today. You had Scotland, Wales, Ireland and England, and you could also add Cornwall and Isle of Man in there as well, because they are all, those are 2 other Celtic nations which have been completely stripped of their identity almost and being completely assimilated with another country altogether. But England is the bigger brother, and it always will be. It has the bigger population, it always has done. It has always been a conquering nation. It is a nation of conquerors. All the conquerors who came there conquered and conquered and conquered and conquered. And so that's what they're pretty proud of. It's just, you know, I just have to look at the Scottish Lion. If you look at the Scottish Lion, anybody who's interested, the Scottish Lion is on its back foot, which means it's in defence. The English Lions are on its front foot, which means they're in attack. So that just shows you the different mentality of the different nations. And Wales and Ireland and Scotland are very similar in that they have always had an English problem because England was constantly coming in and invading and taking bits of land and building new castles and taking this and whatever else they were doing. So that's really an important thing. So when people see this as an anti-English thing, it's not. It's about the different cultures and how each one is led. And when Britain became Britain as a political union, the bigger brother did have just more clout. And so that's why we are still talking about independence today. And other countries, Ireland's Republic of Ireland won its independence. We don't want to go the same way as you did, but you guys got it that way. Wales, ourselves, and those in Northern Ireland, hopefully you take to the ballot box when you do that. But there we go. James just saying, sadly a lot of Scottish history that we know is the English version of accounts, hence why the Battle of Prestonpans is hardly mentioned in our education system, or the Highland clearances that came into effect not long after Culloden. Absolutely 100% correct. We don't talk about the victories and the Jacobite victories. We don't even talk about the fact that Bonnie Prince Charlie had sent a letter 2 years earlier basically telling the English government, British government, but English government, that that he was absolutely not going to change the religion of the country, and he was absolutely not going to change the way things were run. He was just going to come back the way his predecessors had. So that's really important and never talked about either. What you'll learn in school is that Bonnie Prince Charlie was having a picnic at the battle and ran away. That's what we'll remember about Bonnie Prince Charlie, because that's what they'll mention to us in schools. Lindsay, same in US, whitewashed history, I'm sure. It happens everywhere. I'm not going to kid on that it doesn't. Kate, is our English Jacobite on here? At Carlisle Castle there's a place where they kept Jacobite prisoners, and there is a stone that is quite smooth, and it's called the licking stone, where they stop giving the prisoners water. Sorry, that's really, really sad. That's really getting me sad. They licked the rainwater that ran down the walls. Isn't that just absolutely horrendous? Absolutely horrendous. That was in England. Obviously they had their different reasons for it, and arguably some of the English Jacobites were treated far more harshly than the Scottish Jacobites were. And I've said this to you before, Kate, the last Jacobite to be hung was in fact a doctor in Carlisle who just happened to be treating both sides. It was the start of a shameful genocide and the ethnic cleansing by British forces against the Jacobites, never to be forgotten, hopefully never to be forgotten. There's very little actually that the British Empire can be happy about, guys. Let's be honest. They went all over the place, emulating what they did in Scotland and in other Celtic nations across the British Isles. They did exactly the same thing when they went into India, when they went into Africa, when they went into America and the North Americans, when they went to Australia, New Zealand, all the native peoples. It was just horrific. But everything is done so politely and with a cup of tea that it doesn't seem as barbaric as what it actually was. But it was incredibly barbaric, guys. We're nearly done. Brittany and France. Yes, Tom, I didn't mention Brittany in the British context because that's a French problem. Brittany is absolutely a Celtic nation, the Bretons. But yeah, it was a big issue. So what is the best resource to read to get more Scottish version of Scottish history, including Culloden? The latest Murray Pittock book is very good about Culloden, the debunking of the myths of Culloden. It's very good. There's also Damn Rebel Bitches by Maggie Craig, and also that's The Woman of the 45, and then there's Berarst Vendettis, which is The Men of the 45. So they are good books. I can recommend them. I'm very careful about what I read about Culloden because things are moving. Our understanding of the time is getting better, and I hope at least. And so the books that we're getting are better than what they were. So if you've got an old book about Culloden, don't discount it, still read it, but have a look at it and see, God, is this person using incredibly biased sort of language? If so, it's probably not going to be the best or most factually correct book or source. Because remember, guys, everybody looks to their own sources. They usually source other people's opinions. It's always a good idea to try and inform those opinions yourself and go onto the archives. You can read some of Bonnie Prince Charlie's letters. You can read about the different archaeological studies and so on. I always recommend you do that. And then, read a book. It always helps. I didn't know about Murray for ages. Well, I knew it, but I didn't read anything about him. I didn't watch anything about him because I kind of put my blinkers on. I was like, I can't listen to another pro-British piece of nonsense. And then I did, and I was pleasantly surprised because he's been saying what I was saying the whole time. So I'm just going to say goodbye quickly to our guys on Instagram. Guys, thank you so much for taking part. It's been magic. I'll be, for those who've donated to my little cause, I'll be sending out the special podcasts and photographs and everything to you guys soon. So take care. Love you lots. Mwah. So that's the Instagram. Gosh, I could go on and on. So if I do go on and on and on, guys, please just let me know. We could probably spend a whole session going into the Darien scheme. James, thanks for that. We could probably do that because it was pretty much a deliberate attempt to make the Scots fail, and this is after the Alien Act and everything else. I think what Lenny said is quite correct though as well. To be fair though, I suppose that was the nature of the beast during the empire building in those days. There was no Geneva Convention back then. Absolutely not. But we need to remember that the powers at be then are still the powers at be now, and it's really important for us, if we are going to look at this properly, just like with anything, like with what's happened with the slave trade and things like that, there needs to be genuine remorse for the sins of your forefathers. I'm not that person, I didn't do that, but it's so meaningful to acknowledge the sins or the horror that you did to others. It's so important that you just acknowledge that and say, we are sorry. We're going to, you don't even have to say, I'm sorry, because I can't be sorry for anything. I'm 300 years late nearly. But what I can do is say that that was wrong, and we accept that that was wrong, and that this is actually, there's some really good information that's starting to come out now about what people were actually talking about. And apologies guys, I don't even know how to switch this off. It keeps coming on, but anyway, I don't know. Just switch it off, it's fine. So, yeah, so that's my wee 2 pence about you have to just take ownership of the past atrocities led by your country that you still benefit from, even to this day. It's true. Tom's saying, and yet Bonnie Prince Charlie insisted on honourable treatment for the Redcoat prisoners. The Jacobites picked up after their victories. Absolutely correct. In fact, famously, he had them treated first. Kate, my distant cousin, and his wife were in prison in the Tower of London after Culloden. It's terrible. Laura Pfeiffer, did the Scots fighting at Culloden have force? I can't read. Did the Scots fighting at Culloden have horses or very little amount? So yes, they had a very little amount of horses.
One cavalry, didn't
they only had what? Yeah, they only had 1 or 2 cavalries, but not very many at all. Traditionally, they can't really deal with the terrain as much, especially you know, in the kind of areas that they're going to. James Gordon, don't read anything by Neil Oliver. Yes, don't read anything by Neil Oliver, because he'll tell you that the Highland clearances were, what did he say about the Highland clearances again? He said that the Highland clearances were an opportunity.
An opportunity.
They were an opportunity.
Agricultural reform.
No, that was the Arran Museum.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. No, he said that they were an opportunity for those who left because their lives were so miserable, and it was a really massive favour to be kicked off your land. But anyway, no, Neil Oliver. Please do not do anything with Neil Oliver. Donation. Oh, Trish. I was just talking to the other guys there, Trish. I've been doing like, obviously because for the majority of this year I'm not really working. So I'm doing special live posts and then special podcasts and slightly better, more formulated content, I should say, because this is just me chatting, but that's what it's all about. It's just having a wee chat about history, and I want to have that conversation with you. I don't just want to sit here and just talk. But you can get access to stuff like that as well, and some pictures and some other podcasts that I have done in the past, and I've done one on Culloden. So I've got this thing called buymeacoffee.com. It's in the link somewhere on the page there, Trish, if you want to have a look at it. Not compulsory at all, it's just nice, and I'm very grateful. I should actually do a big shout out to everybody who's donated to me already. I couldn't believe it. It's been absolutely amazing. Very much appreciated, and yeah, it just made me feel very happy and full of love on this day. Hi Hugh, they've made you stay a wee bit sane. Oh, you could take us for a nice dinner. That would be lovely. That'd be, or just take us to the pub. I just want a really good drink. I think Helmut would love a good drink and a good pub. Probably not in Greenock though. Lindsay McAllister, I'm not sure. Okay, sorry. Lots of myths about Darien. It's all about stopping lawsuits. Sorry, if I'm being a bit slow here, guys. And there you go. So while I'm here, I may as well just quickly let you know about our Culloden tour. When we're there, we usually spend a good 2.5 hours at Culloden. And the reason for that is because by the time we get there, it tends to be coming up for lunchtime, and they've got like a little cafeteria. It's dead reasonable, fresh enough food, nice coffees, reasonably priced, clean, everything you would need. So we tend to have lunch there, either before or after the group go and do the experience. So you can go into the experience. It's like the museum, the exhibition. And you go through and you get your ticket, and if you come with Slange, you do get a discounted rate. It's nearly half price actually with us. But when you go, they've got like a little ticket, and you've got a map of it, and it takes you all the way around to the very end. So it starts at the beginning, what the Jacobites were all about, and then it finishes up at the very end where you can actually see some of the weapons and things and onto the battlefield. But you'll probably see from my previous videos, I like to do the tour of the battlefield myself, because I prefer doing that to hearing things that I mentioned before, like it was a civil war and it was Lowland and Highlander against one another. I find that completely mental that you can allow something or somebody to say that, but until further notice, we just have to wait. And unfortunately, Mr. Neil Oliver is the patron for the National Trust. So nothing against the National Trust, actually, guys. I do love most of them, but that's just my one little niggle. The exhibition itself is actually very good, though. If you do get a chance to go in, then I do the tour of the battlefield. You can finish up at the shop, and as you usually do, and they've got some nice things, and some of the books that I was mentioned you can actually buy there. That's in fact the one thing I do say, depending on your time, there's this really amazing immersive cinema experience at the I keep saying the exhibition centre. It's in Glasgow, in the visitor centre, and you go in and you are surrounded, and it shows you how it possibly went down, and it's very well done, and it's the Clan Ranald guys apparently who filmed that for Culloden, so it is very good. If you have a chance to go, we would love to take you. If not, it's definitely a must visit. And if you can make it on the 16th of April, perfect. I just want to finish up here because I know it's late what is my favourite pub? My favourite pub in Scotland? Oh God. Oh my God.
We've talked about this before.
We have talked about this before. Where's my favourite pub in Scotland?
The Lochside.
The Lochside in Islay. Well, I like that one. But I also like, I also like the Isles Inn on Skye in Portree. The Isles Inn in Portree is amazing. I love it there. There's always something going on.
Hootenannies.
Hootenannies in Inverness is good, although it gets too busy, gets too crowded. In Glasgow,
The Potstill.
the Potstill, but there's also the Islay Inn.
Mm-hmm.
The Islay Inn in Glasgow is my favourite. Actually, I have to say the Islay Inn is my favourite because I don't know, I just like it. I don't even know why I like it, I just do. But there's so many great pubs in Scotland.
No, that's a great place.
Bonnie, you're right, they do a great soup. Well, they do a good soup and a sandwich, you're right, it is soup. And you did the shop. And the wee film, Kate's just saying the wee film got me quite emotional. I actually had a gentleman on tour with me and we walked out and tears were streaming down his face. It was just so, he just was overcome and he had no, from what he knows, in fact he will have, but as far as he was concerned, he had no Scottish ancestry. And Trish, yes, it is. But yeah, so you've all seen the cinema experience and I'm glad you guys are writing your comments here because it's good for those who haven't been. It's definitely worth a visit. And please feel free if you have the time, if you go through some of our video posts here, there's plenty. I mean, I've done about 6 or 7 Culloden videos. Where I kind of walk you around the battlefield or I'll show you something about different times of year as well, so you can have a look at that. There's actually one day in particular there was no wind, which was amazing because I think that only happened once. But do have a little look and go on and you can actually hear me chatting about the different parts and showing you the different things over the years. I started doing the Culloden videos probably about 5 years ago, so you can have a wee look at that. So I'm going to just see if anyone else has any other questions here just quickly before I go. I just see that everybody's just pouring out their emotions when they were there. Imagine the horror of waking up the following days after Culloden to a living nightmare day and day, yet the nobility of a desperate, poverty-stricken people refusing to surrender their prince. God bless each of them, and may heaven welcome them all into their heavenly home, and may their spirits roam free over the land they loved and defended so bravely. Much love. Thank you for that, Tom. It's a beautiful, beautiful comment there. Oh, thank you, Sheila. Very kind, very kind. And Kate, you're welcome anytime whatsoever. And much love to you. I haven't spoken to you for a while, and you have been in my thoughts. So I know you've had a rough couple of years. So all here, love, give back, and cheers, Bonnie. Guys, I'm going to call it a day. Thank you for taking part in my chat. And if there's any questions about anything I've discussed, please just do get in touch. That's what I'm here for. Or you could join, I've got a group on Facebook called the Scottish History Police as well. So if there's anything you want to come in or discuss, it's a great place to do that. So it's the Scottish History Police. There's only one of us, so you can go in, we'll welcome you in, and you can take part in any of the discussions that go on at any time. And it just kind of puts things into a different perspective. So there you go. But thank you all so much. Good night. Aichava. And I will see you tomorrow at 10 again for Ghost Story Night. So take care. Love yous all. Bye.